Welcome in, everybody. I'm your host, Alexis Jade,
And I'm Laura Quinn.
and welcome in to the Cheer for Queer
Queer.
podcast.
I don't want to say it again because we're always delayed with this. I don't know what it is. I think it's the program we're using, but when we say cheer for queer, it sounds like we're in sync, but we never are, so.
Yeah, we never are. It's very delayed, and we don't know why. But here we are. And this is the last day you're going to see Alexis with this do, by the way. Because I
Is
have a
it?
hair appointment in like 2 hours that I have to get to. And it's nothing drastic, but we're getting some highlights and we're gonna change up my style a little bit, I think. We'll see how it all pans out. Anyways, this is the old Alexis and the new Alexis you'll see in the next episode, which might even be no, this the next episode will still be here,
It's
but
in a week.
um I was gonna say might even be in person, us, but
I
not the
think
next
there's
one, the one
one in
after that.
between. Yeah, there's one in
Okay.
between, but
One after
it's gonna be
that,
there very soon.
we're gonna be in person.
Yes.
But
So
we're not here to talk about Alexis's hair today. We're here to talk about cancellations, some queer show cancellations in the
very
wake of,
common.
yes, as we all unfortunately know, it seems that every other day there's a new queer show, and not necessarily queer show, but a show that just happens to have some queer characters in it that is canceled.
Yeah.
And it just seems to unfortunately be a reoccurring trend. And with another cancellation in the midst, we thought it would be fun to kind of dive into it and talk about it.
Yeah, because I think that the most recent one, unless we've missed another one, which wouldn't surprise me, was
Right.
what was it? Everything Now?
Everything now, yeah.
Yeah. I actually haven't seen it, to be honest. And the reason is, and this is actually really bad because I am probably one of the people that is contributing in these cancellations, but for anyone who doesn't know, Netflix has a crazy algorithm that
Yeah.
is I don't know. Okay, so here's the thing. They say they have an algorithm. I have my doubts on that,
Yeah, same.
but
Oh,
that's something
100%.
we'll go into later. But I haven't seen the show because I have built an amount of distrust, I think you call it, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't trust streaming services anymore because I have been so devoted to certain series and every time they have like 6 to 8 episodes and then I am super like intrigued by it and I'm so like I'm standing hard and then they get canceled. So I have now been kind of living in a way where I wait until there's a second season announced and then I'm like, okay, I can watch it. Which
Yeah.
eventually, if the algorithm is what it is, it's actually pretty bad because yeah, I should be watching it, but
I mean, I kind of do the same thing though. Like, I didn't used to, but now, in the wake of a specific show, which we'll talk about later in the episode, I pretty much do the same thing because I just can't get into shows anymore unless I know that there is like hope for them. And I can also say from
yeah.
an actor's perspective, quote unquote, like we're gonna get into a little bit of the whole like streaming part of all of this and how that plays a role into these cancellations. But like as a viewer, I'm like, I can't even get into a show anymore because I just don't even know if we're gonna
Yeah.
have another season. And then as an actor, I always think like people's jobs are just like that. And that's how it is in the industry. Like they go
True.
in a blink of an eye, but nowadays with streaming, it's like it literally used to be you would have your job locked down for at least like 20 episodes, 40
Yeah.
episodes if you got signed for at least 2 seasons. But now it's like 6 episodes and you're done. Like
Yeah.
that's a few months of work. That's it.
It
Like
it is
it's
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah. And I was just looking up the synopsis for anyone who doesn't know what Everything Now is. Usually I would say go and stream it, but only do it when you're prepared to not get a next season.
Yeah.
I am gonna watch it eventually. Like I will be watching it. Maybe I will be watching it now because I don't know if there's a whole fandom who's gonna like riot for this. But I was looking for a synopsis, and what it says here is that it's about a girl, Mia. She's 16 years old, from London, and she's entering a sixth form at the fictional Westmere School after returning home from a stay at a rehabilitation center for
Oh,
disordered eating. Although she's only been gone for a matter of months, Mia realizes that her closest, I want to say closest friends have moved on without her. And so what I think, because I watched the trailer before this, is that there is a lot of people of color in it. So there's a lot of diversity in it, which was one of the reasons why it was very popular. And on top of that, there is two women of color that are, I don't know if they're going to be in a relationship. So no spoilers here. I genuinely don't know, but there is a some sort of like form of attraction and love between two women of color. So
Nice.
it's definitely a queer show, which is pretty upsetting for a lot of people because that's something we really look forward to. And I mean, like I said, I'm gonna watch it, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be sad that it's canceled. But yeah, like I can't really say much about the show itself, but it's another disappointment for the community.
Yeah, and we just kind of wanted to start off with that one just because it is
Yeah,
the most recent one. But yeah,
yeah,
I also haven't watched it, so we can't touch too much on the actual contents of the show itself. But I mean, it's just another one on the long list that we're going to get into further in the episode here of shows that are being canceled that have queer representation.
yeah.
And it's just disappointing. And
I mean,
especially something like that where there's a lot of diversity too, because it's not just queer
yeah,
representation, but also diverse representation.
yeah. It's pretty sad though because like if I'm looking at like this situation, right, where we're saying like we honestly don't know about the show itself, and we are going to watch it, but we just have no information on it. We're just upset that another queer show got canceled. Like it's so weird to be in a position where I'm saying that for when I speak to like for myself, because I remember that every time there was a show that even had the like tiniest bit of like queerness or something like LGBTQ
Yeah.
plus in it, I would be like jumping on my bed out of excitement. Like I couldn't wait
Oh,
for it to
same.
be released. I would binge it the moment it got out. Like if it would be released at like 12 o'clock at midnight on like usually it's Fridays, like I would be awake then. Like I would be ready to just watch through all of the season, everything that I could watch, and I would rewatch it probably the day after. Like I would be
Yeah.
so excited. And right now, because of the whole situation the past few years, how it constantly cancels everything, um, I just don't watch it anymore. And I just, go back to rewatching shows that have more seasons, that have sometimes even like like worse representation in it
Yeah.
because it's from like a while back, because I don't trust streaming services anymore.
I don't think we can talk about all the shows yet that have been canceled without first kind of diving into the streaming element of it all, because I think that plays a big role in everything that's happened. And, obviously, when things used to be TV, it's much different now than they are streaming. I mean, we're talking about episodes used to be like at least an hour long for 20 episodes a season, and now they're what, 6 episodes long.
Yeah,
You're lucky if you get 45 minutes. Like now they're sometimes 30-minute long episodes, and you're sacrificing storyline, you're sacrificing
yeah, for sure.
like building the universe, like, and that's just the show element of it all. That's not even like getting into any analytics or
I
anything
mean,
like that.
I think to kind of back that up is that, and this is not like a show that's related to queer content at all, but the Netflix just brought out Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it's funny because they already were renewed for two other seasons, like
Right.
within a few days after release, which is why I don't believe in the so-called Netflix algorithm where like the first week they look at the streams and it needs to blow up because um then they're going to see if it's going to be renewed because they clearly already had the contracts. Like it doesn't work that way. I feel
Right.
like there's something else going on. But good for The Last Airbender. But to get back to the point where you were saying that, it's only like 6 episodes long and it's like usually very short episodes and you cut down storylines. Like it's funny to see that with a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender, that's basically a live action version of an existing story already. So like the script is there, not fully, for live action,
Right.
but
Right.
the story is there. But for some reason, even then, they can't seem to pull it off properly because everything needs to be like squeezed into these like tiny episodes, and it needs to just be as short as possible. And it just really, I don't know, takes the magic away from, like, what the Netflix, for example, is trying to bring across, the entertainment they're trying to bring. And especially with like queer series, you see it a lot too, where it's just only 6 episodes and the storylines just, because it's such a limited amount of time that they have. And even then with queer series too, they don't even use all that time to actually work on the storyline itself.
Right.
Like the time gets so limited that it's just, I don't know, even the representation, it's not great either. But
Right.
we were watching it because we want to have that representation. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just very interesting to see how they went from 24 episodes that were maybe a bit more low budget to very high budget, like 6 episode shows that you don't even like
You don't even
value
build
the
a
quality
story.
of them much.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't even get to build like a story, and if you try to spend 6 episodes building the world, right, then
Yeah.
the ratings are going to be bad because obviously the
Yeah.
first season of a show when it was on TV was always slower because they were building. But like what you brought up about Avatar getting, like, they obviously already had a contract in place to like get multiple seasons. So like why do they get contracts for multiple seasons but other shows don't? And I can tell you why. In a sense, it's because Netflix is, or whatever streaming service, right, for other ones as well, they're spending more money on this project. So obviously, if they spent more money on it, they're going to say it needs at least 2 more seasons because we spent millions of
Yeah.
dollars on this. But it still is stupid because if you can do that for other shows, why can't you do that for a show like Warrior Nun, where it has like a very good storyline, but you need
Yeah.
to allow time for it to develop? Why couldn't that have like a 2 season contract, 3 season contract? Like, it's
Yeah.
always the queer shows that suffer, and it really
Yeah.
grinds my gears.
Well, and it's funny that you say that it's always the queer shows that suffer, because there is even a division between certain queer shows. And like there's two directions we can go into. I think there's
Hmm.
one series that I have as an example that I'll name first, that is a queer series with a sapphic love story that did get like renewed, but I was confused about that for way too many seasons. And then you have the other side of it where there's queer shows that get renewed, but usually it's a men loving men show rather than a
Yes.
sapphic show, women loving women. But the first one that I was confused about is compared to something like Warrior Nun that I absolutely loved because of the representation, because of the storyline, because of the detail in it, like the way that they handled everything. I was so confused to hear that that show didn't get a third season, but then Riverdale. Freaking Riverdale.
Oh,
How many seasons? There's a sapphic story in it, right? Which, to be honest, I was the most confused about, and I think we could dedicate a whole episode to Riverdale because it was sapphic, but also the way where they started, um, I don't know, going through time, and then all of a sudden Betty was kissing Cheryl, but they were different people, but they're cousins. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. But a show like that where it was so crappy got like, how many seasons did they get? Like 7? I don't know.
it's
I
like
might be
six,
completely
seven,
wrong.
something like that. I don't
A
know.
lot of seasons. Whereas like something like Warrior Nun, like I said before, like they don't even get that chance, or everything now. Like I'm sure it's really good. Another show that I absolutely loved, which was more like Stranger Things kind of vibe, was I'm Not Okay with This,
Hmm.
which was also great. It was starting a sapphic story, and like I believe that was also higher budget, like on the higher range of budgets for Netflix. But these like shows don't get the support and love from the streaming service itself. But then when it comes to like something like Riverdale, it just, I don't know. That was
Yeah.
a wild show for me. I don't understand how they got so many seasons, especially because I seen more people who hated it than loved it. But yeah, that was interesting.
I mean, there's so many women, like shows that have lesbian relationships, right, in them.
Yeah.
And obviously, as two females and in a lesbian relationship, that's going to be like our focal point here. And there's so many shows that had those couples represented in them that were canceled. And it does make you question because there are some really good shows out there that have queer representation, like you said, and shows like Heartstopper, like Atypical, like shows like that that have good representation. But
Yeah.
also, it's not always, I guess Atypical's maybe the exception to this, but it's not always women loving women, queer, lesbian relationships that are seen. So it's hard because like, we can go through all our shows that all our shows rip that we lost this year
Yeah.
or in previous
That is
years.
a
Like
whole
we can,
graveyard.
yes, we can give our little like shout outs here in a minute to all those
Yeah.
shows and like, our reaction to those shows. But I do think it's interesting seeing, like, I'm super happy to see shows like
Heartstopper. Love
Heartstopper have
Heartstopper.
success because I think it's a great show. But it just sucks that it's like I'm so happy about it, but then like the part of me that wants to see lesbian relationships on TV is like, why is it so hard for us to get that though? Like, why is it so hard?
Yeah. I think that it is interesting because and maybe we're leaning into Warrior Nun a bit more now to because I personally think that's a really good example of like a show that deserved much more love than it actually got from specifically the streaming service. And this all happens to be Netflix just coincidentally, but we have other shows like Willow and everything too that are
Right.
on different streaming services. But I think it's interesting to see how in the time that Warrior Nun got their second season in, it absolutely blew up because I remember seeing the charts, worldwide charts of net
Yeah.
on streaming services in general, on Netflix itself. Like Warrior Nun was on top of those constantly. Sometimes not number one, but they would be in the list of the top 10, right? So you can't deny that they performed very well. And that was in the time that we had like Warrior Nun, we had is it called Red, White, Royal, Blue? I always forget the
Oh
name.
yeah, Red, White, and
I
Royal Blue.
love the
That just came
movie.
out recently.
Yeah, it came out recently. And then you have Heartstopper, which was also around that time. And you had what is the other one called? It's a Scandinavian show.
Oh, is that the
Oh, I
oh,
always
what is
it's on
that
the tip of my
called?
tongue.
Oh, what is that called? Ooh,
It's
we
on the
might
tip
have to
of my
come
tongue.
back
I
to that
just had
one.
it in my head and it just was gone. But yeah, all these shows basically came out around the same time, like the in the span of a few years. And it was interesting to see that these three shows that have men loving women. Oh God.
Whoa, straight couples, no, run.
Just
Wrong
grab that. Cut it.
podcast.
Cut it out. Cut it out. It's interesting to see that these Royal Blood, is that the show?
Oh,
Royal Blood,
oh,
I think.
something like that. Something like that.
Okay.
It's like,
So
yeah.
just came back. Anyways, I don't know if that's actually the name, so there might be people listening being like,
Something
that's not
close
the
to
name.
that. I'm
But
sure if people have watched it, they know
the
what you're
the
talking about.
Scandinavian show.
Yeah.
But there's these three shows with men loving men, and they all got renewed, which I am happy about because I absolutely love them, and I think they deserve new seasons. But it's sad to see that all these shows get renewed for a second movie, for a third season, for a
Right.
second season, and then you see the Sapphic shows, and they just don't seem to
Don't.
get the same chance. And I don't know if it's coincidentally or if there's still like I can't even think about what the reason would be, but like it seems to just be very unfair in that way that there's just there's a very clear difference in the chances that these shows get compared to the Sapphic shows.
Well, in my honest opinion, like if you look at the common trend is women. Because look at shows like The Wilds. The Wilds
Yeah.
was fantastic its first season. So good. And they were a show that already had a contract for season two, which is why
Yeah.
as soon as season one was dropped, they already announced season two because they
Yeah.
got signed for two seasons. And then Amazon Prime said, you need to have boys in this show. And it
God, that was bad.
completely, we could dive into that because there was so many reasons that season two,
Be a separate episode.
yeah, because like there was way too many characters, not enough time,
Yeah.
too little episodes, all that stuff. But like, what's the common theme here? A show all about women
Yeah.
gets canceled. A League of Their Own, a show all about women gets canceled.
Cancelled.
First Kill, a show with two female leads
Can we
gets
can we talk about
canceled.
First Kill? Can we talk
Yes,
about First
please.
Kill
Yeah.
for a quick second? I know
Yes.
that there's a lot of people who hated First Kill, but what I found so interesting is that they hated it because it was very like cheesy and very like badly written and whatever it was. I actually loved First Kill because it took me back to the time where I used to be obsessed with this, but it took me back to the time where I was watching Twilight And it is basically, because to be honest, like anyone who says that Twilight was perfect, well written, well
I
like
don't, if anyone says that, I'd be
executed,
shocked.
it was cringy, okay? But let me have my cringy shows. Let me have my cringy movies. I loved First Kill because it was so cringy and you didn't have to think, you just watched and you were like, oh my god, what am I watching? But it just took me back to like that nostalgia of Twilight, and like those kind of shows. So I love that. And when I seen that it was canceled, I was very surprised because I was like, okay, I actually thought they would give this a chance. But for some reason, that doesn't. But then shows like Sabrina, the what is it called again?
I think
Sabrina.
it's not Sabrina the Teenage Witch. That was the OG one, which I
Yeah,
loved.
that's the OG one. The
Is it just
the
called Sabrina?
yeah, but I think there's like a little subtitle below it.
Eh.
Anyways, I like Sabrina to an extent, but I can say that there was a lot of similarities in like I think the people who would watch it, like the amount of cringiness in Sabrina was on the same level in my opinion. And that show gets like how many seasons did Sabrina get? Plenty.
Too many?
And
Yeah.
then First Kill doesn't even get a chance. Like within the first week or something, they announced, "Oh no, never mind." And I'm like,
Right.
"Okay, Netflix, I am sure that you already knew you weren't going to renew it when you put it out. Can you just script it in a way that it just has an ending,
Right.
please? Like, why do you use these cliffhangers if you know you're not going to renew it anyways? Like, I don't understand it. Just make it a movie then, or just make it like a movie with different parts, but at least with like an ending. Like, make it full circle. Because I am so sick of all these cancellations that I don't even bother watching anymore. So, like, A League of Their Own, I didn't even watch that show because I already felt it in my guts that it was going to get canceled. So I was like, you know what? I'll wait. If I'm surprised and they get a second season, I'll watch it. If not, sorry, because I don't trust them anymore.
Yeah, and I just want to touch quickly on what you said about First Kill. Is
Yeah.
I admittedly wasn't a like huge fan of First Kill. It wasn't my cup of tea. I wasn't a huge fan of
Yeah.
Twilight either, so no one come at me. But I they weren't my
Oh,
cup of tea, okay?
that's
Like I
interesting.
I don't love the cringy stuff. And I did personally find First Kill cringy. But
It was cringy.
but
That was the whole point of it.
right, but what I'm trying to say is that when I talked to you about it and I said that and you were like, "Yeah, but that was the whole point." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's just not my cup of tea. I understand like kind of why it didn't perform well, maybe or had
Yeah.
bad reviews." And you said like, "Okay, but like we have all had to watch the series of Twilight, right? For how long we did and that cringe. Like why can't we have something like that?" And I was like, "That's a good point because here I am as like an actor, content creator, and I'm always saying that. I'm always like, I want to make a rom-com. I want to make a thriller. I want to make like all these things where it's a lesbian couple is the main couple, all this stuff. And I was like, that's a good point. Like, not every show, this is where it walks the fine line. Not every show has to be good, but also we are allowed to have like our cheesy chick flick like rom-com thing. So I just thought that was a really good point you made about First Kill, and it kind
Yeah.
of opened my eyes a little bit to it as well.
Yeah, because you have movies like The Kissing Booth, which again is an example of exactly the problem right now. The Kissing
Right.
Booth got 3 or 4 movies. I watched the first one. I am a sucker for these Netflix originals that are so cringy when I'm in a sad mood and I'm like, I don't know what I want to watch. I don't want to
Yeah.
watch like an Oscar worth movie because that just goes over my head this moment because of all the hormones and emotions I have. I'm just gonna put on something really bad, like very cringy. And I like it.
Yeah.
But I always wonder, okay, but why can't this be queer? Like why can't we have that? And it's just so interesting to see how that just works. Like a straight version of, the
Yeah.
Kissing Booth would get 3 movies or 4 movies. And then if it would have been queer, I bet you that it would have only gone one.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
understand why, because it is the same concept. The only difference is it's 2 women loving each other instead of, a guy and a girl. So what is
Yeah.
up with that?
Well, and as we were talking about earlier, is like I kind of think the common trend because honestly, Atypical is really the only show that's had a full 3 seasons where they finished the show
Yeah.
how they wanted to. But that show, like even though there was a lesbian couple in it, they weren't the forefront of it, right? So they were
No.
still like side characters in this. But they were so far really the only successful quote unquote show to like have representation. But I do think there's a common theme with the fact that it's women. Like, because when,
Yeah.
like, for example, when we're talking about stuff like Heartstopper, don't get me wrong, that's a great show. But it's like, why is it that it almost seems everything that has to do with female leads and female oriented shows and female relationships, where it's lesbian
Yeah.
couples at the forefront, are canceled and they are never given a shot. And I just think that's my personal opinion. But I'm just noticing a common trend and I'm just
Yeah.
calling it out because I think it's kind of accurate. But I mean, that being said, there's obviously the one show that we talked about a little bit earlier as well. And
The
that
one that hurt the most.
the one that hurt the most, and the reason we bring this up is, well, obviously it had the huge fanfare from it and it had the huge
Yeah.
outcry after it, but it's because it was probably, in my opinion, and I think your opinion as well, but feel free to speak how you feel, one of the best written lesbian relationships I've seen
In a
on
long
TV
time.
in a long
Yeah.
time. And so I think that one hurt the most because there was so much potential and it was so well written and it was the long game, and then all our hearts broke.
Yeah, I think when we were talking, and we're talking about Warrior Nun here, in case
But
you
yes.
haven't figured that out yet. Yeah, I think Warrior Nun was definitely a show that you need to enjoy. You know, it needs to be your genre. And I don't think we're really going to talk about like that. Like, we are obviously big fans. I absolutely loved it. I think it was a great storyline. But what was so special to me about Warrior Nun is the fact that they managed to do a slow burn in the most natural and healthy way.
Yep.
Like, it was a slow burn where you got hope and you weren't afraid that it wasn't going to happen. It was, the way it's supposed to be. There, you have Beatrice, one of the characters, and she meets the main character, Ava. And in the first season, you can see that there's a bit of tension, but it's a very genuine emotional connection they're building.
Yeah.
And in the second season, you figure out that Beatrice, even though she's struggling with her own identity and sexuality, she is starting to show like signs that she's interested in Ava. And Ava ends up being, even though she's dated guys in season one, interested in Beatrice. And it's just like such a wholesome and genuine way it happened that it was good that it was a slow burn. It was that
Yeah.
slow burn where you want it to be slow. You're excited for that slow build up and you can't wait for like a next episode because you have hope, right? And I think for me that was so special about this show and the reason why I'm so upset that it didn't get what it deserved.
Yeah, and I think the show itself, like we could do a whole, if people are interested, and I think we're interested as well, in doing a
Yeah.
whole separate podcast on Warrior Nun, like just really deep diving into the show, everything else. But like if we're talking, in the theme of canceled shows and queer relationships and lesbian relationships, like I agree with everything you said, and I'll also add that like because it was such like they also had such genuine moments. The
Yeah.
actresses had insane chemistry, first of all. So like from
Yes.
season
Well
one, even
casted.
when Ava was still like interested in a guy, it's not like they were showing her like playing the field. Like they showed her
Yeah.
having a developing a relationship with Beatrice that you were kind of like, oh, like are they just about to become best friends? Or is there like there was
Yeah.
moments that even as the audience you were watching and you're like, wait a minute, like that seems like a little spark is going off. But you were kind of
Yeah.
like, we all have trauma from shows nowadays. We were all kind of
Yeah.
like, we'll wait and see if this is actually something or we're just reading too much into it. But no, it was something, and they did the long game. And I think that's the most painful part is everything you were saying, you then get to season two, the finale, and spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it yet, sorry,
Yeah.
maybe it's been out for a
Go
bit now
watch it
and
first.
we don't know if it's
Then
ever
finish
coming
this.
back. Yeah, but they finally like quote unquote get together, but they really don't. They
No. Yeah.
kiss and then they this is way too hard to explain without ever watching the show, but basically they end up together but they aren't physically
They
together.
have to part
And
ways. Yeah.
yeah, they have to part ways. And it's like they finally confess their feelings for each other, and then the show's canceled. And it's like, what? After two
Yeah.
seasons of pining and them falling in love and watching them both fall in love with each other and like a very genuine, raw, like love, and they
Yeah.
finally confess their feelings and it's done? What do you mean?
Yeah, and
Like, that's not fair.
keep in mind that the writers and the directors of the show, and was Simon the director and
He was
writer?
producer.
Yeah, oh,
Producer and
producer,
also
sorry.
had a hand in writing, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. So he also spoke out about it. He has fought so hard to get it back on screen, and
Mm-hmm.
succeeded in a way. It's going to be a trilogy of movies, right? If I'm correct. For now, it's sort of
Yeah.
announced. It's a bit vague, but he has worked so hard to get it back on screen. But he announced that, if they would have gotten another season from Netflix, which by the way, this was all super unexpected for them too, because
Mm-hmm.
they actually thought they would get an extra season. They've
Yeah.
written it in a way that they would come back together very early in the season
Yeah.
again, if
Mm-hmm.
not in the first episode already, because at the end of the show, if you watch the credits, you can see that this is really vague, but there's like a little scene where it's hinted that Ava actually isn't as far away as we think she is, and that they
Mm-hmm.
will be reunited very soon. Was why, like, it didn't feel like it was supposed to be canceled at all, and the writers didn't expect it either, which I think made it even harder because it wasn't supposed to stop, and the writers weren't like planning on it either.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the part that sucks too. And I mean, I think the whole no movie trilogy thing has more to do with the original producer or writer of the comics.
Yeah,
Simon doesn't really have any, he said he doesn't really have anything to do with that. So I think in terms
sadly.
of the Warrior Nun that we know from Netflix is gone, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Simon did say what season three would have been. So if you're interested in that, there's a podcast out there where they interviewed Simon and they talked about that. So it's just like you knew, like you said, they set it up so you knew at the end of season two that they were going to be reunited.
Yeah, that was
And
Endgame.
season three was going to have them reunited pretty early on. So it's like
Yeah.
even more painful because you would have had so much more scenes of them together because like
Yeah.
that would have been the plot line of season three would have been them together. Now,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have been necessarily working together at that point, but that's a whole different topic. But like yeah, I just think in terms of like representation, and the thing is, it's not just the queer relationship that was good, the show was good. And like you said,
Yeah.
it had to be your cup of tea, but like that was a show that performed really well. And this is what brings us back to the whole like streaming and cancellation is like in terms of Netflix's reasons for the numbers and the streaming amount and everything else, like this show had zero promotion when
Yeah. Zero.
season two got released. So season two apparently was supposed to drop a different day than it did.
Yeah.
The production, like the producer had no idea they dropped it on the same day as Wednesday. They dropped
Yeah.
it like the
Which
same
was
day
insane.
as their biggest Netflix show.
Yeah.
And without any announcement, without any precursor, there was no promotion for the show for season two. So it was pretty much like Netflix already screwed them and was kind of like, if it performs well, great, but most likely it's not going to, so we're going to cancel it
They
anyways.
set it up for failure, and
Yeah,
that's the funniest part of all of this, right? Because they set it up for failure, which was already weird. Like, why would you do that? Because I don't think it was that low in budget at all,
right.
because it's pretty well done, and there's a lot of CGI and stuff used too. But the funniest part is they set it up for failure and it went through the roof. Like, it
Right.
was one of the most watched series on
It
Netflix.
still
And I think
is.
one of the other it still is. And I think one of the other reasons, just to really quickly touch on that, is also that it was a series about nuns.
Mm-hmm.
Uh and the funniest thing was that like Ava and Beatrice, like none of them have ever questioned their sexuality vocally. Like no
Mm-hmm.
one ever questioned it. They didn't have to deal with anything. It was just accepted, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a moment where Beatrice realizes that she is in love with Ava, and one of her like other nuns, like fellow nuns, says like it's okay. Like you're not the first one to fall in love with the warrior nun. but like no one questioned like, oh, is that okay with religion? Like, and I think that's why it touched so many people, because it went a step further than just like representation for,
Yeah.
like just people who are queer. Like it just touched on so many things and made it feel so natural. And I think that's also why it performed so well, on top of the fact that the storyline was so good.
Yeah.
And I don't think Netflix expected that at all, because they were just
No.
thinking one last season, whatever, we'll tell them later. And then it just blew up and they couldn't go back anymore because they didn't have budget left. That's what I
Right.
genuinely think happened.
No, same. I believe that too. And I think the thing is, they also claimed that, well, I shouldn't say this. The producer Simon Barry had said in that podcast I mentioned before,
Yeah.
that where he talked about the season three, he had said that, oh, Netflix, sorry, moving my camera here. Netflix, you know, they admitted basically that the way they did the analytics after the show finished, when they decided to cancel it, like they did it too soon, and now they changed the way they review shows. But to be honest, I don't know how much I believe
I'm not
that.
buying that.
Like, but they did genuinely cancel it. Like, they made their
Yeah.
decision, like, oh, what, 7 days after? They didn't announce it 7 days after, but they had
No,
made their
yeah.
decision like 7 days after it streamed. And I'm like, so you're telling me a show that got zero promotion, you dropped it on the same day as your biggest Netflix show, and you
Yeah.
gave it 7 days to perform. Like, most of the views came after the news of the cancellation, of everyone being like, wait, the season dropped? I didn't even know it was out yet. Snooki from Jersey
Snooki.
Shore was
Yes.
pissed. Snooki was
She
like, what
was
do you mean you
pissed.
canceled it? I didn't even know season two came out yet.
Yeah.
And she was part of the people. Like, there was this, like, for anyone who wasn't following Warrior Nun, like, this wasn't just lesbian fans. Like, this
Yeah.
show, this had
Everyone.
actors and actresses. The actors from Lucifer were tweeting to try to save Warrior Nun, because they were like, what? This was canceled. This was a great show.
Yeah.
Like, they were trying to get it saved. Like, this was huge, because that's what I mean when I say it wasn't just the queer relationship. It was
Yeah.
also a very good show. And, but it just sucks that it was most likely because Netflix doesn't value queer relation, like lesbian relationships and lesbian or female leads, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. Like, I really just don't think they do. And not just Netflix, streaming services in general.
It will always be a question for me, an unanswered question, why they made the decision that they made. I don't know if they made it beforehand already and they didn't have budget left, but it's just such a weird decision to make, knowing that it was the biggest show on Netflix at that moment. It
Yeah.
even almost surpassed Stranger Things, which was absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And even after they canceled it, people went wild. Like, I don't, if you haven't seen it, I was so surprised by the amount of love the show still got. And you just mentioned Lucifer, and Lucifer had kind of a same situation where after a few seasons they got canceled, and there were, I believe, like how many, a few million tweets hashtag save Lucifer exactly a year after it started, and that was the reason why they rebooted it. So they gave them another season. And I think that happened twice with Lucifer, but that was a really big milestone where they were like, okay, we see that the fans reached, like, I don't know how many, I can't remember the number, but like
I don't know the
1.8, for
number.
example, million
Yeah.
retweets. So let's just bring them a new season. And Warrior Nun, I remember this, reached more than that number within the
They like
first
doubled the
week of
number. Yeah.
hashtag say, no, more even. Like, I remember sitting down, and I was also there in the phase with Lucifer trying to save that show because I loved Mazikeen and Eve. And within the first week, they reached that amount of retweets. And
Yeah.
I got hopeful because I was like, there's no way they're going to cancel it, permanently now, because this really shows like how much this show is loved. There were so many, even politicians who like retweeted it being like, we love
Yeah.
Warrior Nun, which was crazy. But they just, I don't know, they just didn't want to do it. And they were also really difficult when it came to giving up the rights. And it just felt like, it felt really like weird seeing how they acted in this whole situation, how they didn't want to, admit that they made a mistake, but then also they don't want to give it the chance to be rebooted somewhere else, because they were
Because they
like,
know
if
it'll be
we
successful.
can't have it and we decided we
Yeah.
won't, no one else can. Which was just, I don't know, it's still, it's crazy to think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think your theory of the money thing is probably right because
Yeah.
I was honestly surprised that Netflix didn't reverse their decision because after the like you said, I mean I honestly think they quadrupled the amount of like petition signatures, tweets, like
Yeah.
attention that like it was written on Variety magazines, like everything. Like they
Insane.
quadrupled
Yeah.
the attention. So I was honestly like when Netflix didn't reverse their decision, I was like they're not giving the rights away because they know this thing would be
Yeah.
successful. And like you said, I think they didn't want to admit their mistake and they had already allocated the budget for the next because after they canceled Warrior Nun and I think a few other shows, they had announced a new wave of shows coming to Netflix. And I'm like, oh yeah,
Yep.
they totally have already done their budget. So they can't
Yep.
even save the show if they wanted to because they are already using those funds towards a new show. So
Yeah, and yeah. I
it's
think
just messed up.
for Warrior Nun, we're probably going to talk about it in the next episode because I think there's much more to talk about. All the amazing things that fans did trying to,
Yeah.
get it back on screen. And but there's many other shows too that got canceled where I was surprised too. For example, and this is one of the shows where I think this is my first kill in a way. What first kill is for you. Willow was for me. I tried watching Willow. I finished Willow. I was confused. I was cringing more than I ever had been before. I didn't know I could cringe this much. But even that show, and I think that show is even more shocking than Warrior Nun in a way, because I don't know if you know about Willow's cancellation, but where Warrior Nun just immediately got a cancellation, Willow, the show that was on Netflix, they actually got renewed. And people were so stoked because they were like, oh my God, there is a Sapphic story. Main character's a Sapphic in a Sapphic relationship. And this is like big, right? Because they get a new season. And then I remember that after a while of being renewed, they just heard, like, oh, never mind, we're going to cancel it anyways. And
Yeah.
that was so crazy too. So, like, it doesn't only happen with, like, shows on Netflix. Like, it happens everywhere. Like, we
Oh
already
yeah.
talked about Prime, but we also Netflix, or I mean Disney Plus is also doing it, like with Willow,
Yeah.
for example, where they even renewed it first and then it got canceled anyways. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's there's a lot. A lot. I mean, we could probably talk for like another hour about all the shows getting
Yeah.
canceled because there's been so many. But yeah, I think it's just unfortunate that it really seems to be lesbian like it's queer in general, don't get me wrong. Like we're lacking in diversity,
Yeah.
we're lacking in queer representation in general, but it definitely seems that lesbian relationships have really gotten the blunt of the trauma from all of this. Like they're the ones
Yeah.
really taking the hit in all the shows, and it just really sucks. It's like as a viewer, as like an actress who also is queer herself, like I'm pissed and it sucks. And like all we can do is do what we're doing now, which is talk about it and bring it to light and continue to talk about it and be like things need
Yeah.
to change. And hopefully the more we keep talking about it, the more we keep bringing attention to these shows and stuff like that, it will eventually make change. And,
Yeah.
all the other people, aspiring actresses, producers, directors coming in the future, we can all collectively start to make the change ourselves.
Yeah, I just hope that we go back to a place where we can just have 24 episodes of a
Oh,
show
same.
that, in my opinion, can be less like more low budget, because I'm currently watching Shameless. I had never watched it before. This is the US version, by the way, not the UK version. And I was watching it, and it has like 20 to 24 episodes a season. And it has like, I think they had 11 seasons. I'm in season 8 now. And I just absolutely love binging it. And I just hope we can go back to that, because it's not like I was bothered by the fact that, if it even is, because I don't know the numbers, like I'm assuming it was more low budget than what Netflix is doing with, for example, Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I'm like, why can't we just go back to just spending a little less money on CGI and all these things? Because people really don't care that much about it. We just want to have our stories, like, told. Like, we don't care whether there is 5 million euros spent on CGI. Like, I'd rather have that spend on the storyline, and having to, look through a few things where I'm like, oh, they could have done that better, or you know what, in like 4 seasons from now on, they'll have much more budget for that to improve. Like, I'd rather have that than what they're doing right now, because they're just focusing more on what it looks like. than what it's about in a way.
Yeah, agreed. I would absolutely love to go back to I would love to go back to 30 episode season or
That
30
would be
episodes. That's a bit
great.
much. But 20 episode seasons, hour long,
Yeah.
like I would love it and I know it's a lot of work for the crew and the cast, but trust me, they would also love it because that means they're
Yeah.
employed. That means they have a job for at least like a year because a 20 episode season will take like almost an entire year to film. So like,
Yeah.
if you're including filming, post production, all that stuff, right? So like it works out the best for everyone. And it's only
Yeah.
more income to the networks and stuff who do it. So like yeah, I don't know. I agree. I think it's an issue also with allocating budgets and trying to be as cost effective and get the most money as quickly as you can versus making actual good like withstanding shows and stuff
Yeah.
because you really don't have like 6 episode shows or 6 season long shows anymore or anything like that,
Sadly, no.
sadly. But I mean, I know I could talk about this for like probably another 2 hours because there's so many different like directions these conversations can go,
Yeah.
honestly. But we are on a bit of a time crunch because I do have my new due coming
Hair
soon. So
appointment.
my hair
Yes.
appointment. But Laura, any other like last thoughts on anything that you want to just shout out that we maybe didn't go over?
I mean, I have one honorable mention that I haven't watched myself yet because I had trust issues, but
Okay.
we haven't mentioned Paper Girls, which apparently is really good too. So go and
Yeah.
check that one out. I haven't myself either, so I will do that too. And I have a little fun fact that I've seen on Instagram. I'm gonna grab it here right
Yes.
now on my phone, which I thought was just funny to mention. It
Queer
literally
fact of the
has,
day.
yeah, the fact of the day. It has no purpose, no value, like no nothing. I am trying to find it. Ah, here we go. So I was scrolling on Instagram this morning, and I seen something that I thought I would just share with you guys. A sexually transmitted fungus is making trillions of, what do you call that insect again?
Cicadas.
Cicadas. Hypersexual and gay. What to do with that? I don't know. I just wanted to tell you guys. So,
Apparently, there, there's a wave of cicadas coming in
some raging
starting like in May.
homosexuals.
Well,
So,
starting in May, there's like 2 generations of cicadas that are like
yeah.
rebirthing themselves as they do every generation or whatever,
Yeah.
decade. And apparently, they're all also going to be gay.
Yeah,
So,
so you know what? For the next years, I wonder how that's going to turn out because maybe we'll just not have them anymore. They go extinct
sounds
because
good to me.
they're all same-sex couples then. But yeah, we just wanted to let you know that Pride Month is
Yes.
going to be extra gay this year.
Yeah, so if you want more like random queer facts, make sure you follow it or subscribe to this podcast so you can
Yes.
find out about gay cicadas. And
Maybe we'll do a
like the
whole
video.
podcast about it.
Yes, like
I
the
never
video,
knew.
comment your thoughts on it. Like if there's any shows we didn't mention, because I know there
Yeah.
are. If there's any shows like you want to mention or shout out, or you have a difference of opinion of something we said, like go ahead and comment it
Yeah.
down below. Leave us a review and also follow us on our socials. We have a TikTok account, Cheer for Queer on TikTok. We
Cheer
also
for
have our own
queer.
personal socials, which will all be in the description below.
Yes.
But we appreciate everyone for watching. We enjoy having these conversations, and I hope you guys enjoy listening and engaging in the comments with us and stuff too. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate
Yeah.
you for tuning in. And soon
Yes.
we'll have our episode in person, which
Yeah.
is going to be super exciting. So thank you guys for
We'll
tuning
see you
in.
next week.
Yes, we'll see you next week, and thank you guys for watching. I'm Alexis Jade,
And I'm Laura Quinn.
and this
And
has
this
been
was
Cheer for
Cheer for Queer.
Queer.
Did
Can never
not
be
go
in
well.
sync.
This was Cheer for
Bye.
Queer. Bye, guys.
Bye.